For a full year, I watched as opportunities kept vanishing. Invitations stopped coming. Referrals fell through without explanation. I couldn't understand why doors kept shutting, or why people I'd known for years in the creative consulting industry suddenly seemed distant. I spent months convincing myself I was just being paranoid. I rationalized every lost project, telling myself the industry was simply competitive and unpredictable. I internalized the failures, assuming there was something wrong with my own work. The truth finally surfaced at an industry conference. An acquaintance I barely knew pulled me aside and said 5 words I will never forget. "You should talk to Priya." Priya and I had been close friends for 7 years. We shared the kind of intimacy where you reveal everything, your ambitions, your secrets, your failures. I believed our friendship was entirely safe. A betrayal is uniquely devastating when the attacker has spent 7 years mapping your exact psychological vulnerabilities. Over the next 2 weeks, I made quiet phone calls to a few trusted contacts. The damage was extensive. Priya had been telling our overlapping networks that I missed deadlines on a shared project, which was false. She labeled me with a difficult personality and claimed clients were complaining about my work. A whisper campaign functions as a slow, steady drip of doubt spread across an interconnected network to create a cumulative effect. Priya bypassed skepticism by framing her sabotage as genuine worry, saying, "I just hope she's okay, she's been struggling." To make these lies sound credible, she used my own private insecurities as the raw material. Things I had shared with her in strict confidence were repackaged as professional flaws. This sabotage relied entirely on turning my willingness to be emotionally open into a weapon for my own destruction. My immediate instinct was to confront her loudly, to demand answers and force a public argument. I chose instead to utilize absolute silence and patience. Over the next 2 months, I quietly reconnected with the specific partners and consultants who had grown distant. I shared recent results and factual project data, letting my actual track record speak for itself long before I ever saw Priya again. This led up to the annual industry roundtable. 30 senior leaders gathered in a room for a full day. It was the highest concentration of the exact people Priya had spent a year influencing. Midway through the session, a colleague raised the specific project Priya had used as the foundation for her rumors, asking for my perspective on the delays they heard about. I presented a purely factual account of the project timeline and the final deliverables, which had actually arrived 3 days early. I focused entirely on the data, never mentioning the rumors or Priya's name. Across the table, Priya went perfectly still. The senior leaders in the room had heard her version of concern for months, but they were now looking at the actual contracts. The direct contradiction made it clear that her worry was a calculated fabrication. Presenting undeniable truth in a vacuum of emotion causes a false narrative to collapse. Once the first lie is exposed, every other concerned comment she had ever made was viewed through a new, skeptical lens. She called me that evening. I didn't answer. Over the following months, the invitations returned, and the referrals resumed as the network recalibrated. A saboteur requires a baseline of trust from the network to function. Once that trust is fractured by a verifiable lie, the damage is impossible to repair. Priya's credibility within our circle evaporated. Her influence faded, and she eventually relocated to a different city to start over. Lies require constant, active maintenance. Reality is inherently patient. The truth only requires one clear, well-engineered moment of exposure to permanently dismantle years of deceit. Vindication is achieved by engineering the exact conditions where a lie can no longer hide. Has someone ever used what they knew about you against you? Tell me your story in the comments. Subscribe because the truth always finds its moment.